Polls continue to show that the high cost of living and inflation, this continues to be the number one issue for Canadians. We're going to do a deep dive on this topic today with Ian Lee. He's a professor at the Sprott School of Business. We're also going to talk about the broader economy a bit. Professor Lee, thank you for taking a few minutes to help us unpack this problem, and hopefully you've got some good solutions for us today. But I wonder if we could maybe start off with just inflation that Canadians are seeing. When you look into your crystal ball, and I know it's quite good, are you seeing any signs of relief coming the way of Canadians in 2026?
Possibly. And I'm not sitting on the fence. It partly depends on government because government is policies have a big impact
Mhm.
on inflation. And we've known that for, oh my goodness me, decades and decades. We can
Yeah.
do things like regulate the price of dairy and milk and cheese and poultry to very high prices, to very high levels, which we do, and then call it supply management and say we're doing it to protect farmers, but we drive up prices.
Yes.
I argued very quickly. I argued at the very beginning of COVID when the Bank of Canada drove interest rates down to basically free, a quarter of 1%,
Mhm.
and Mr. Trudeau dumped billions, enormous amounts. I said at the time, this is going to let the inflation genie out of the bottle. Because if you
Yeah.
overstimulate monetary policy through unbelievably low interest rates and excessive fiscal stimulus, then you're going to pay a price. There's no free lunch. So governments have
Yeah.
a big part in inflation, and they are notorious for not wanting to discipline themselves. I mean, Milton Friedman won a Nobel Prize basically for saying that some years ago. So
Yeah.
I think it could. I mean, I think the Bank of Canada got burned, and I'm talking back in 2021 when they went too low, far too low,
Yeah.
um, for far too long. I think they've been burned, and I think that they're the grown up in the room right now. Whereas at the fiscal
Mhm.
side, we're running deficits of 80, 90 billion, and they're only going to get larger at a time when the birth rate is way down, at a time when where the population is aging because of my generation, the boomers. And so there's some very tough choices ahead. Very tough choices.
Yeah. It seems like a very difficult problem to deal with because that inflation that we saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's baked in now. Like the price went up significantly. People are paying that. And now if it only goes up by maybe 1 or 2% or 3% if we're lucky, that first portion is still there that we all suffered through. Am I right, or are we going to see any kind of actual drops to mitigate this?
You're right. No, you are right. And I lived through. I was at the Bank of Montreal as a mortgage manager in 1980 when the interest rates went to 2021. Why did we do such a terrible thing? It was the only way that we
Yeah.
could kill inflation. I'm using very aggressive language. Inflation had gone up to
Yeah.
14, 15% baked in. And the central bank
Yeah.
of the United States and Canada finally decided, look, the only way we could do it is have a rip roaring recession. They didn't say that, but they knew when driving
Yeah.
interest rates to 21, they were going to produce a recession, worst recession, highest unemployment since the Great Depression, but it worked. And we
Mhm.
killed inflation. We squeezed it out for 35 years until we acted, in my opinion, irresponsibly at the beginning of COVID
Yeah.
because we way overstimulated both monetary policy and fiscal policy. So I'm hoping that
So
that they can do something. He's going to have to keep his finger on the interest rate pulse at the Bank of Canada, and they can't resist. They can't listen to people saying you got to drive it down because we can't drive it down until we get that inflation back in the bottle.
we've got about a minute here, but if we go back to that inflation that we saw during COVID, like you say, the government printed up lots of money, spent it, combined with low interest rates. There was some debate at the time and coming out of that period about sort of the inflation that people were seeing and how much of that was due to government policy versus other factors. Where do you land on that now that we've got several years worth of hindsight and data to
Yeah,
look at?
I've certainly followed the debate very carefully and read both
Yeah.
sides because of my own interest in it. Because I lived through the previous period of what I would call government policy irresponsibility, deficits
Hmm.
in the 70s that got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we didn't take control and so forth. So I lean. Of course, anything has multiple causes. I acknowledge that. Yes,
Yes.
there were factors outside of Canada's border, but I still believe that driving those interest rates down to basically free And guess what we did when we made it free? Everybody went and borrowed like crazy.